Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent experiences in business.
Learn what their cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Welcome, Cohesive Leaders. We are so excited to have Luke Mickelson here with us in the studio for today's episode. I'm Dr. Troy, and next to me is
Ben-Jamin Toy.
Ben-Jamin. You know, you got a name like Benjamin, you got to have a Ben-Jamin going on.
For a long time.
That's right. That's right. So, Luke, we're going to give you your own personal thing. We're going to do a little thing for you. Luke. Okay, yeah. We do that to kind of get you started, get you all ramped up. So, welcome to the show, Luke.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. It's great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it's all good.
Well, Luke, we want to get to know you in a way that we start all of our podcasts, all of our interviews. Tell us something that wouldn't be found on any professional bio or write-up on you, things like that. So let's get a little personal.
Sure. Why not? Why the heck not, guys? We just met. No. It's funny when we train our chapter presidents for the organization I started, we always kind of start out with what we call the icebreaker dinner, right? Where we talk and, how'd you get here, blah, blah, blah. But then I said, you had to share one thing about yourself that no one knew. And I always shared that I was a good salesman and I convinced my wife to marry me in 2 weeks. But I think the most important one, well, I shouldn't say most important, but a funny one I rarely share is when I was young, my mom put me into breakdancing lessons.
Oh,
yeah. So okay. Although I never got paid for it, I'm a professional trained breakdancer.
Nice.
I love it. I love it.
Now you could have gone to the Olympics if you stuck with it.
Dude, seriously. I mean, yeah, I would have been, I know I'd have been top of the charts.
Compared to Australia.
And hopefully your wife's not listening since you actually decided this was more important than having convinced her in 2 weeks to marry.
Thanks for pointing that out, Dr. Troy. I appreciate that.
I'm here for the obvious. I mean, that's just the way it works.
I've got it.
But if she's anything like mine, she doesn't listen to our stuff. So,
No,
mine doesn't listen to me anyway. So
right,
it doesn't really matter. So.
All right. Luke, next question. Describe yourself in the values or character traits you have or that others would give you. So if you were to leave a room, how would you describe? If you're in a room of opportunities, what are the things you aspire to be known as? We're going to separate any roles or hats you wear. These are values and character traits.
Yeah. I'm from a small town, and being from a small town, you have this sense of support from your community and giving support. So I valued service a lot and always have. And so I think, when I leave the room, and I remember I was in a job interview after I quit my job for Sleeping on the Peace, and he asked, similar question, what is it, if you could describe yourself in one word that you want people to remember you as? I said service, because I always felt like service puts us in such a state of mind or perspective of mind to be able to handle almost any challenge you come with, right? And when I served a mission for my church long time ago, my mission president actually told me some great advice. He says, Luke, if you never want to work a day in your life, look at your work as a form of service. And it was so true. Even the hard days where it's a grind, and you're trying to just get through the end of the day. When you look at it and say, but I'm out here serving people. And I was industrial water treatment, which was kind of hard to find a way to look at service through water treatment. But at the end of the day, when you realize, listen, this whole company, this organization, whether it's dealing potatoes or yogurt or milk processing or whatever, it didn't matter. When I was in the shop or in the facility, I always wanted to make sure I was there serving them, right, and satisfying whatever needs they had. So,
yeah, it's really interesting too when you talk about service, because it brings to mind servanthood, being a servant at heart and looking at the characteristics around what a servant leader would be like. And certainly being teachable, being considerate, empathetic, caring about the needs of others before self. As a matter of fact, for us, under our Cohesion program, the very first layer of infusing cohesion into your leadership or into the culture of your work is the transformative principle of putting others before self. It's not a martyrism. You're not sacrificing self. You are simply putting the needs of others before self. And then, and it's really interesting if you think about it conceptually. If everyone followed that philosophy, everyone would be taken care of. Nobody would be left out, because it would be a reciprocal sort of process that goes on. And so, like that the service part is really good. But what would be some other words that you would use with service that I think help describe you?
Well, I think I'd like to say humility, which goes along with that, but it's kind of funny being from a small town. If you could pick up a ball of any shape or form and throw it in the right direction accurately, you're going to play sports whether you like it or not. And so I grew up playing a lot of sports, and I was successful at it. From a small town, it didn't take long, or didn't take much to be the athlete, if you will, of the school. And that was me growing up. And so humility, I'd like to say, was always a challenge, especially when you're young that way. But service helps you with that. Service helps you realize, your place as in the world, and how you can help other people. And I think it brings you back to reality sometimes. So, humility is one I strive for sure. But probably one of my biggest traits is I've always loved bringing people together, right? I think my sports help with that. My small community certainly helped with that. And then when I started Sleep in Heavenly Peace, I realized if I really wanted to make a dent in the world with this problem called child bedlessness, it ain't going to happen by myself, right? I'm going to need some help from other people. And it's not going to happen from some farm kid from Idaho that's going to, help all these kids across the country. So, and I've always been, my friends always said, listen, if Luke's involved, he's going to want everybody involved. And that is so true. I'm the guy that goes to like one of these parties or these big events, these big conferences, and it charges my batteries. I'm ready to go. Boom, boom, boom. Where other people, it's just so exhausting. And I'm quite the opposite.
Yeah. So what are some of the roles that you would now describe yourself playing along the way of this journey of life? We got breakdancer as one of the roles. We know awesome breakdancer, so we know that. And obviously you are a very persuasive person, since you were able to convince your wife in 2 weeks to marry you. So we've got those two. What are some other titles that you want to share with our listeners?
Oh, father. I want to make sure that's a big one. Obviously, we do our best, don't we?
Yes.
As a father. I was a coach. That was one of my favorite titles. And still to this day do some coaching. Not like I used to, right? When you're coaching t-ball and flag football, then high school football. And I really enjoyed that. I later on was in work. I've held many roles, marketing manager, vice president of sales, district leader, district manager, whatever you want to call it, in various roles. My one I lean to the most is owner. I'm an entrepreneur, so I love building and selling organizations, companies. I've done that several times. I'm always like a lot of founders. I think you're always got your mind thinking and seeing problems and creating businesses in your mind of how you'd solve that. Just endless, right? It's almost exhausting. So founder is a big one. My current role, I was the founder and then executive director of Sleep in Heavenly Peace for a lot of years, which now...
Slow down. Say what you're a founder of again. Say it, the full thing.
Yeah, Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Yep, that's like it came from the song Silent Night around Christmas time. Yeah, and so when I started that organization, of course, I was the founder. Being a nonprofit, you become the executive director, and I was that for many, many years. And then just a couple of years ago, we got so big, and as a founder, you spend a lot of time in PR work and doing stuff that's not managing. And so we brought in an excellent manager to be the executive director. And now my role is founder, and I kind of self-proclaim my title as an ambassador for our organization and for our mission, as well as for child bedlessness. That's such an unknown problem in our country. I'm trying to raise as much awareness about it as I possibly can. So an ambassador for the organization, as well as for the kids that don't have beds, trying to find and support them.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Such a good role to have
Awesome,
too.
awesome.
Let's transition then. What's the you came prepared to share that you're willing to let the world know about?
Well, thanks for this, and trust me, it's an of the highest degree in a lot of cases. Something that's, and the reason why is because it's one of these phenomenons, these syndromes that founders not only will experience, can avoid, and sometimes it's as bad as people commit suicide over it. And I wasn't that close, but I tell you what, it was extremely personal, and it's called founder syndrome. A lot of people have heard this word before, but my was not realizing that I was being affected by it. And what this is basically is when you start an organization, right? You build it from the ground up, and if you're going to build it from the ground up, you got to put your heart, blood, sweat, soul, everything into it, right? Well, this process is called identity fusion, where your company and your organization and yourself just become identity fused. There's no way around it, right? It's your baby, it's your life, it's your passion. So pretty much you become one. I mean, right now, 99.99% of the planet that knows Luke Mickelson only knows me because of Sleep in Heavenly Peace. So your identities become one. Well, as you grow and as business evolves, well, guess what else evolves, right? Companies evolve. They get new management. They get new policies, procedures. They get boards that tighten on governance. Well, your founder over here, he's evolving too in a much different way. Well, now all of a sudden, this evolution between the company and the person is now pulling this fusion apart, right? I didn't know that was happening to me. I wasn't taught. I didn't. And when you feel this disconnection of identity fusion, it becomes very personal, very hurtful. You start lashing out in defense. People think you're trying to keep control. You feel betrayed. I mean, there's all these horrible, horrible feelings that come when you're starting to suffer from this disconnect of something that you loved and is very, very personal to you. Well, you react poorly, and honestly, guys, had I not had my moment where I went, I'm in trouble. Like there's something going on that I got to change, or else I'm going to get kicked out of my own organization. And that's a real thing. It's a very real thing that happens all the time. And so I guess, my moment was when I realized that if I don't get help, I'm going to be gone. And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand, looking for therapy, looking for coaching, taking anxiety medicine, doing all these things to try to calm myself down so I can figure these things out. And, luckily I had some people that are patient enough with me to be able to do that.
So describe as specific as you can, what were the things that you were doing that then all of a sudden had the epiphany, wow, I need help. So like, for instance, for me, it might be something like I'm a little more sarcastic, or I was more abrupt or curt with people when they were trying to talk to me, or I was only shouting out processes or things to do and not really listening to anyone. So give us some of those kind of descriptors that was happening.
You bet. I'll give you the exact moment when something happened. I went, oh crap. So, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, we build beds for kids in a very simple form. And we do this through big events. We bring all, the community comes in together. We have tools, we have wood, we teach them how to build beds. Well, we went to our largest sponsor is Lowe's, huge sponsor. We're very tight with them. Well, last year they put on with us a huge build. We built 5,000 beds in 24 hours straight. It was awesome. This year we just did 10,000. It was cool. But last year it was the biggest build that has ever been, right? Guinness Book of World Records, they were going to show up, but they cost too much. But anyways, so it was a great event, right? And here I am, the founder, working with the organization, the company, the partner that I've been working on for 10 years, built the relationship, got it all going, right? They Good Morning America is going to show up. We're going to get interviewed. We're going to do all this stuff. And all of a sudden, they asked, who do we interview? Well, me as the founder, right? Not that I care too much. I've been on Good Morning America before, but my partner, Lowe's, didn't select me. They selected my best friend, the executive director, who did a fabulous job, but they selected him. Now, I know that how that sounds. It sounds very arrogant. It sounds very controlling, but you got to remember, when you're tied to something so personal like your foundation that you started, right? When people tell the story, they're telling your story. You know what I'm saying? And so when someone else does that, or someone looks to someone else to do that, it's very hard not to go, wait, well, what did I do? What's wrong with me? Like, am I doing it bad? And then to top that all off, I literally had a board member standing next to me, and he goes, hey, look, it's our new spokesperson for Sleep in Heavenly Peace. I mean, you want to talk about a knife that goes in your back. And he didn't mean anything by it, right? He was, we were all there just having a good time. But this is what I call a relevance wound when you have founder syndrome. Something says something, you realize you're not invited to the meeting anymore, right? Or this isn't your decision anymore, or programs change that you set up early on, So that moment right there, Dr. Troy, I got very upset. I mean, I had to walk away. And the sad thing is that I was super happy for my friend. I was happy for Sleep in Heavenly Peace. We're going to be on Good Morning America. We're growing. We're all this wonderful things that I should be, doing cartwheels over. And I'm in the corner about ready to jump off a cliff, right? Just struggling. And that's when I thought, okay, I know how I'm going to react if I don't get this under control. Because there were similar things that I would react to in the past, previously to that when I walked away, days later, I looked back and went, or I found out that that's not what that person meant at all, right? They didn't mean to offend me, So that was a very difficult time, and it's an aha, oh crap, whatever moment that you want to call it, that every founder, especially if their business is successful, every founder is going to go through it, right? Every CEO, even every business development leader that starts some sort of program, builds a program from the ground up, and all of a sudden they're not needed anymore. They're not wanted, not necessarily wanted, but they're wearing a different role, right?
Right. So interesting. So I want to just bring this to the emerging leaders who are listening. And so I love the fact that you have identified it as a founder syndrome, but let's just break this down in that the fact is that we all create group identities with anything that we're associated with. That's just part of the nature of the way we are. And certainly when we give too much of our identity into something, it turns it into cult, not just culture. So, worrying about, so how that is. So oftentimes, as we are thinking inside an organization, we give so much of ourselves into that company that we're working on. We don't see the promotion. We don't see the advancement. We don't see the training. We don't see those particular things. We take on a particular mindset that says we then aren't important. We're discarded. Our relevance all of a sudden isn't being supplemented and supported in a regular way. So what you're explaining by that definition of founder is really what also happens inside an organization when people let these cobwebs get inside their head, instead of having those moments of clarity to determine, hey, is this really being something that am I being targeted in this way? Or is it just, sort of happenstance, it just sort of happened to be the way. You could go back and talk about that situation and why they selected the guy. But what I really appreciate is that you focused on yourself and really started to say, I had this moment where my emotional intelligence really showed up for you, and in a good way, because our emotional intelligence is our ability to be able to be self-aware of what's happening around us. And then our self-regard or self-regulation is being able to manage those emotions. So instead of you letting that emotion become like a volcano that just spewed out over everyone, and then you would have had to sort of explain yourself someday later, as to, why you may have acted the way. I love the fact that you did a personal retreat back into the space before you reacted. So,
I think the hardest thing we have to do in life, probably the most important thing, arguably, I think the most important, is learn to be honest with ourselves, right? If you can learn just to be honest with yourself. Number one, you'll never get hurt because you already know it. Right? You're being honest with yourself. And part of founder syndrome, I do some coaching on this now that I've been through it. I know it is. One of the first, what I call the 5 disciplines of leadership evolution. The very first one is pause before you protect. Right? When you get that relevance wound and boom, it stabs you, and it happens all the time. Unfortunately, whether you're a founder, a CEO, a business leader, someone that's just really connected to an item or a program or a business, whatever. When you become somehow fused to whatever degree of fusion that happens, right? You're going to experience it. You will. And as founders, it never goes away. At least it happens for me. It's never going to go away. I'm always going to have this connection, this strong connection to this organization. And when I feel like someone may be threatening it or pushing me out or dissolving my connection to it, right? You're going to want to lash out, right? And that's why that first step, pause before you protect. And you're right. It's emotional maturity. It's emotional stability. It's being able to look back and say, okay, and a great example. We just had this event again, 10,000 beds in 24 hours. It was awesome. There's a few relevance wounds that happened during that. I knew it. I went into it. I told my wife, look, I'm going to have some relevance wounds, right? So, there's going to be times that I just need to be quiet. I need to step back. And I had not a huge one because I knew what it was, but I had one that took me about 3 days before I could really wrap my mind around it and be okay with it. And that's okay. Sometimes they take 3 minutes. Sometimes they take 3 days. But when you can pause and not feel like you have to protect, just pause. And then that gives you the ability, I think, to slow down, to really analyze and think. And when you realize like you're going through this founder syndrome, it's much like if you go to the doctor because you got some ailments, right? I don't know, you're sick, you got the flu type symptoms, you're miserable. Well, when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Yeah, Luke, I don't know what's wrong with you." I mean, that's like the worst case scenario. I mean, you come home, you don't know what to do. You're pissed off, you're hurting, you're angry, you don't know what to do. It's frustrating. Well, transversely, if you go to the doctor and he says, "Yeah, you got the flu or you got whatever, take this and you'll be fine." Now you're going to go home and you're like, now I can handle it. Now, even though like it makes me irritable and I'm tired and I'm frustrated, at least I know where it's coming from. And it's a little easier personally for me to handle, right? And then on the other side, it's kind of like if your wife had, I don't know, cancer, heaven forbid, if your wife had cancer and you didn't know it, right? She's experiencing something that's just, it's rough. It's rough on her. Obviously, you don't know how rough, but it's rough on her. But it's also rough on you as an individual because you're dealing with kind of the byproduct of her working through this issue. Well, if you didn't know what it was, man, it'd be hard to just not look at your wife and go, "Dude, chill out, wake up, stop being sick." I mean, you just get frustrated. Whereas if you come home from a doctor and you realize, no, she has cancer, there's a lot more grace. There's a lot more understanding that deals with that. And so founder syndrome just doesn't affect the founder. It affects everybody around it because of, granted, the founder's reaction to things, but it is helpful to have other people of your organization understand that this is a very, very real thing, a very ugly thing too, very hard and difficult to swallow when you don't know what you're doing or don't know you're going through it.
So when you had your epiphany that this is what it is, did you know it was, in other words, did you have knowledge of founder syndrome that then helped you diagnose this, or did you get the diagnosis after you talked about what was going on with you with someone else?
Great question. Thank you for asking that, because the answer is no. And I think why that's even more of an important question than maybe we realize is because, like me, I've been going through this and been stabbed with these relevance wounds for several years, right? And it just got worse and worse and worse. And as business evolves, as we know, individuals evolve differently, especially in the business world, right? The more management comes on, the less you're needed. And that's one of the 5 disciplines too, is realizing that need doesn't have to, not necessarily anything to do with worth, right? Just because you're needed less doesn't mean you're less worth or less value to the organization. I mean, we started out building this thing. We wore all the hats. I mean, we wore everything, right? And obviously those hats get dumped off on, so you're less needed and your responsibilities narrow. Well, when you've been doing everything and then all of a sudden you're just doing one or two little things, boy, that feels like you're not needed, equaling you're not of worth or value, and that's totally wrong, right? And so, but when you're going through it and you don't know what it is, like me, I had no idea. I just felt myself progressively reacting more and more poorly. And luckily, my executive director, who was my best friend, I mean, there was one time he said, Luke, he's in the airport, and I'm just going off about how this guy said this, and he doesn't, he doesn't listen to anything I say. He's been part of my organization for 10 minutes, right? And he thinks he knows everything, and blah, blah, blah. And he's a board member, right? And my buddy just says, Luke, you're being ridiculous. And I was like, coming from a good friend of mine that probably has the, he's got the clout and understanding of knowing that about me. I think that's when I went, okay, I need to get this under control. I literally, Dr. Troy, I went and scoured where I could find, a therapy, a therapist, counseling, coaching, anything that would help me understand and work through what I later on found out and came across. And I kind of heard of founder syndrome. I think we've all heard the words before, but I never put two and two together. And that's, so your question is important, because founders out there right now, and not just founders, people out there right now that are experiencing the same type of thing. This is founder syndrome. Maybe you can call it something different, but that's what's going on right now, is you're feeling disconnected and pulled away from your organization, your mission. I just coached a guy last week that said, Luke, I don't know if I even like my mission anymore, which is so sad and so ridiculous in a way, because of course he is. But what's happening is he feels like he's being pushed out. He feels like he's making all sorts of mistakes because he's not asked. He's not part of the meetings anymore. And that disconnect is making him feel not just less valued in his organization. He's thinking he's feeling less valued towards his mission. And it's just such an ugly, ugly thing. And guys, I don't know. I can't tell you, other than I'm dang lucky that I got a great wife that is patient with me and, doesn't beat around the bush. Luke, you need to stop talking and thinking like this, right? I had an executive director, best friend, that helped me really work through some of these before I said things that I couldn't come back from,
Luke, I'm relating in so many ways. On Purpose Adventures, my side of the company has been around 15 years. And an expression that I heard early on, also because I'm a high D direct person that wants control, that I've had to repeat to myself was, it's amazing what can be accomplished when you don't care who gets credit.
Yeah.
And I've had to repeat that to myself multiple times on that aspect. And I would say I'm just a little bit earlier in that journey, because you just went through this, in the sense that one time I was asked to do a keynote for a huge conference. And I said I was going to be out of the country. And they're like, well, can someone else in your team do it? At that point,
No.
I want to know. Like, at that point, I knew that the company's reputation was bigger than mine.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted as the founder. So it's a hard thing to deal with. And I love it when somebody else's name's in the reviews. But it took a while, right? So I totally understand that. And I also wanted to go back, though. I'm so glad that this is our topic here. And if you can go back to the, at this point, 24 minutes ago, we started off our conversation by separating out two parts. Do you remember? We asked you identity questions,
right,
and then role questions. And that's where the difference is, and where the emerging leaders, because anybody, I understand the founder piece of it, but as we already mentioned, that any role can consume an identity, right? When you get laid off of a company and you are a head engineer, you're a head salesperson, and that's gone. Or you're a doctor and you physically can't doctor anymore, right? Like, that hurts somebody when they haven't been able to separate that they are of service, that they are curious, that they are compassionate. Like, if they can't separate that, that leads to, I think, the syndrome that we're talking about, because they put all of that there.
That's right, the value. It's their value. They've created value around the identity of the title, not the identity of the individual. And that's why we separate, and really wanted to get you to think about it, because we're hopeful that people listening to this will start to go, holy moly, yes, I'm a good, worker, but my existence is not based on that job or that title. It's based on the character of who I am. And it reminds me, my mom was very good in helping me with leadership understandings. I have a very simple background. Love my dad. We had a great relationship too. Mom happens to be the star of the show. And she would remind me that my character would always be defined by the choices I made, not the circumstances I'd find myself in. And so when we're thinking about it, character is defined by the choices that we make and the behaviors that we choose and those values that support those behaviors, not on the circumstance of the role that we play.
Yeah.
And when we can, when I found for myself, so I'm just going to, again, this whole podcast is all about your own personal experience and personal journey. And so for me, when I began to really recognize that, it made a huge difference. Yeah. And I think it really helped me as I transitioned from my C-suite position to allow someone else to come in and take over and to not have my personality, which is a pretty big personality, not to overshadow the individual who was going to then fill in that role and do that job and let them find their own way and let others relate to them in a way that's different. So it takes work. It takes work, but when you recognize it, then you have power over it. It's the difference is when you're not aware and you just keep going on. And if you don't listen to the cues, if I didn't listen to what other people might tell me to help guide me along, then I would simply constantly be on a rowboat by myself, when in fact I could really be on a cruise ship with a lot of other people who really care about me.
Well, I love that because you said it exactly. Look, I love service. I love what you guys said. That's a great separation because when you focus in on that, that's what you're good at. That's what you're known for. But when you start feeling the effects of relevance wounds and being hurt by this, your reactions are poorly. Just like what your mom said, it's your reactions that what defines the man. So when you love the success, you love what your organization is doing, you love all this, but it hurts so bad, you're about to react against your character, right? And that's probably one of the biggest things I realized. I'm like, I'm not a angry guy. I'm not a jealous guy. I've been on every program known to man almost, right? Why do I care about this so much, right? Why is it this knife just pounding in me? I got to stop. I got to figure this out, right? Because I'm going to react, and I have been. It's getting worse and worse. I'm going to react poorly. That's not who I am. That's not what want to be known for, right? So I knew something was going on, and Ben, the one of the best advice I ever got, which kind of fits into what you're saying, and just recently actually, that fits, that fits this scenario the best is when you start out an organization or even a program or a new job or whatever, something you start out, it will not love you as much as you love it. And I love that because I wish I'd known that, starting out, I don't know what would have happened other than I'm still going to fuse together. I don't have that choice. It's going to happen. It's going to, you're going to be, this is going to be your baby. You're passionate about it, turns into your purpose. And all of a sudden this organization or whatever, flourishes. But if I always had that in the back of my mind saying, listen, don't feel like you're married to this thing because it doesn't care two craps about you, right? It's an organization. The only thing it wants to do is grow. And at some point, and I knew this, at some point, I'm not going to be the one that does that. And that's okay. I remember I went to training with all our chapter presidents. I remember for years, I did all the training by myself, just got up there and talked for 8 hours, right? It's much better. It's much better now though. There are people that come to training, to our Sleep at Emily Pieces training. They have no idea who I am, right? And I remember my first reaction to that was like, finally, yes, we made it, right? It's not about Luke Mickelson anymore, right? And even though I was super happy about that, there is a little bit of a relevant stab there, right? That is an evolution that as leaders, we have to learn to grow through, past, beyond, whatever you want to call it, right? That's something that does stab us. We don't want to react poorly, right? So we want to figure out how to react it. But there is no coaching out there that helps a founder go, listen, here's the diagnosis, or here's a diagnosis of this symptom that you're dealing with. You're not alone. This is a very real thing. There's nothing wrong with you, right? This is just a reaction that can be worked on. It can be taught how to deal with it, how to, the guy I just spoke with last week says, I've just learned one rule or one new frame of mind, Luke. He's like, acceptance. And I said, yeah, I get that. I really do. But acceptance is almost like just giving up. Like, it's like, oh, there's a boulder in my way. I guess I just got to accept it. Well, the fact of the matter is, no, there is a way through it. There is a way around it. There is a way that an organization and a founder can still work together, which is going to make both still very strong, right? It's just there's going to be a different role, and that's okay. And it's getting to that realization, I think, that there's a different role, that a different evolution, leadership evolution that I'm going to go through that's much different than what the organization's going to go through.
Yeah. And Luke, one of the things that I would tweak is it's not really acceptance, it's acknowledgement. And I think there may be a way to really make sure that word is a little broadened in the way to do it. It's because, yes, when certain circumstances happen, you acknowledge them, but it doesn't mean acceptance has, to me, a little different. It says, like you, right. It's like, oh, okay, I'm accepting it. Like, well, maybe I don't have any power, but really the acknowledgement of it, the understanding of it, you have power over it, because that's what you have been explaining here in these last 30 minutes to anyone who is listening to this, is that it is under knowing that this can happen and acknowledging that it's there, then you can work on it. Up until then, it has power over you. When you don't acknowledge or take an opportunity to address something that may be harmful to you or to others, then it's not going to have you have the impact. You can make the impact. Otherwise, it has power over you.
Yeah.
Luke, there's an element here now as you're making your transition into the new roles that you have and all that kind of stuff, that something that we teach that I think you can steal, you can incorporate, that it shows all the three elements of cohesion, belonging, value, and commitment, is what we call a cohesive affirmation. So you could make it your mission to go give these types of things. And what it is something that actually, we know an affirmation should be specific. When you call out somebody for doing something, you saw them sweeping the floor and they got all the corners. Great job. But what you actually want to pair that recognition of role with, the activity they did, with the appreciation and acknowledgement of their behavior or character or the value that was done. So it really shows your dedication, your passion, or thank you for getting that project in late last night. It really shows your dedication. So when you're actually able to give an affirmation that is those two parts that separates the identity and role, you're able to help them avoid anything like that as well, because they may not do something very well one time, but that doesn't change the fact that they are typically hardwired to be empathetic, because they can respond. That's not normally your normal role. And then they get to talk about it, and you get to be that new level of coach to people when you're able to call them out on those values, because you can add behaviors to them. So that's something we teach, and it's something that you guys can take the next.
I love that. I love that. Part of my founder syndrome survival course, the very first thing I teach on, the first module, is all about the build part of it, right? And the whole exercise, everybody knows how their organization built. It's their story. But the reason why I have people go through that exercise is because of that exact thing. What you said, much simpler than I say it. I'm a little more wordy than you guys, but it's simply put, remember who you are. Like, remember why you even started this. Remember the sacrifices that you put into it that no one else did, and all these things, not to build up that and to justify why you need to stay in this role and why you need to still control and why. No, it's not anything about that. And I love how you put it very simply. It's just a reminder that these are your attributes. This is your character. Whether you're sweeping floors or selling water treatment or building beds, this is your character. So good on you for following your characteristics, the things that are instilled in you, right? And so when founders go through founder syndrome, I love that. I'm gonna incorporate that, because it is important to remember, look, I love service. I want people to know I'm here to serve, right? And let's focus in on that, which is part of my build internally than anything else. And yeah, thank you for that. That's great.
You're welcome. So I'm going to give you a Cohesion affirmation. So Luke, thank you for being an awesome podcast guest. What we appreciate is your forthcoming. We appreciate your honesty about your situation and what you were willing to share, that you were able to be transparent about this, that you, in sharing, was not overly concerned about how well you would show up. All of this was really great. So thank you for that. And we really, I really do mean that. I want you to be able to take that example with you, that because a Cohesion affirmation has to be heartfelt and has to be true. And if it's not, then you're going to figure out it's not true, and that all I was doing was trying to pander you. But obviously there's no reason for that. So,
thank you. Appreciate that,
Luke. We really appreciate you being a podcast guest with us, and we know that people get in touch with you on what is it, Sleep in Heavenly Peace.
Mm-hmm.
So they know how to connect with you there. But as you prepped for our podcast today, what was a question you thought we would ask that we didn't?
Oh man. Well, my purpose for coming on podcasts is generally to raise awareness about child bedlessness. What child bedlessness really is. Outside of founder syndrome, which I think is equally unknown as child bedlessness, or at least undiagnosed. That's why I come on podcasts, right? Is to share that message and share that there are millions, 10 million plus kids in our country right now sleeping on the floor, and Sleep in Heavenly Peace is the largest bed building charity in the world. And that's sad to say, because there's just not very many that do that. It's such an unknown problem and an unknown fix until Sleep in Heavenly Peace has come around, and now we've built 400,000 beds, and we've got 440 plus chapters all over. And people can find out about us by going to our website, shpbeds.org. So yeah, that might be the only question, Troy.
Well, okay, and good. So you sort of did what we like to do, and that is we would normally have asked you, we would then turn around and ask you the question, but you tended to answer it as well. So we're really, really grateful for that. So Luke, thanks so much for being a part of the podcast. And so we're going to close out this like we close out all of our Cohesion Culture programs with this simple mantra: you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.